The email had no subject, just two words in the body. It's time. That was it. No name, no signature, no punctuation. I sat there in the corner booth of the diner, my fork suspended over a plate of soggy waffles, staring at those words like they might rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. I hadn't heard from anyone in nearly 2 decades. No calls, no visits, no trace of my former life. That was the whole point. I disappeared. But somehow, someone had found me. My hands started shaking. I fumbled my phone and dropped it in my syrup. The waitress, Elva, a woman with a voice like gravel and a heart like stone, asked me if I needed a new plate. I nodded, said nothing, and excused myself to the bathroom. I locked the stall, sat down on the toilet lid, and tried not to hyperventilate. I thought I buried it all. The betrayal, the shame, the way I walked out without a word. No one was supposed to know who I used to be. I even paid cash for everything. Moved states. Grew a beard. Started going by Ben, even though my real name, it still burned on the inside of my skull, felt like something I wasn't allowed to say out loud anymore. I couldn't breathe. 18 years ago, I left behind a wife and a son. Not out of cruelty. Not out of cowardice, though I've been called that more times than I can count in the dark corners of my own mind. I left because I couldn't survive the truth. Because staying meant dying slowly, one lie at a time. But now someone wanted to drag it all back into the light. Back in my apartment, I pulled the ancient shoebox from behind the water heater. Inside were 5 things: a faded photo of a boy with crooked teeth smiling next to a papier-mâché volcano, a copy of my divorce decree, a thumb drive I never opened, a handwritten note with an address I swore I'd never visit again, and my wedding ring. Still stained with the blood from the night, I threw it across the room, and it hit the corner of the kitchen counter. I hadn't touched any of it in years. But now, I had to. I opened the thumb drive. And what I saw first, what played automatically the moment it loaded, was a video. Not a memory. Not a recording from some birthday party or happy vacation. No, it was a hallway camera feed. Dated 2 weeks before I left. It showed my wife opening the front door to a man I'd never seen before. She kissed him like I never existed. But then, just before the clip ended, my son walked into frame. He saw them. His mother. The stranger. And he just froze. I never knew he saw. I never knew he knew. That moment changed everything. Not just for me. Not just for him. But for what was about to come next. Because when I finally responded to the email, just 3 words, I got a reply almost instantly. You deserve to know. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. God knows I tried. I left the thumb drive plugged into my old laptop and just stared at the screen for hours. The image had frozen on my son's face, his little hand clutching the side of the doorway, his eyes wide and confused. I kept wondering what he felt at that moment. Betrayal? Fear? Did he understand what he was seeing? Did he think it was his fault? Because I did. I blamed myself for all of it. I paced the floor of my apartment, wearing a hoodie with holes in the sleeves and mismatched socks. Every creak of the old floorboards made me jump. I kept expecting someone to knock, to appear, to demand answers. But no one came. Just silence. The same silence I'd lived with for years. I replied to the mysterious email again, this time with something more direct. Who are you? The response didn't take long. Meet me. Same address. Friday. 6 p.m. Bring the drive. I almost threw up. That address. That cursed address. 1127, Pine Grove Lane. My old house. The one I left without a trace. The one where my marriage died. Why now? I took the next day off from my night janitor job. Didn't even tell them. I just stayed home, staring at the wall, occasionally checking if the email was real and not some cruel trick my brain had invented after too many years of isolation. But no, it was real. I checked the IP. I traced it. It came from my hometown. Friday came too fast. My hand shook so badly I dropped the keys twice before getting into the car. I hadn't driven in that direction in years. The roads felt unfamiliar, like they were swallowing me whole. The trees looked taller, or maybe I was just smaller now. When I turned onto Pine Grove, my breath caught in my throat. The house looked different. The siding had been redone. New windows. A fresh coat of paint. But the porch swing was still there, the one I built with my own 2 hands the year Gideon turned 5. I remember sitting on it with him, telling stories about dragons and knights while his mother was at yoga. The driveway was empty. I stepped out of the car, thumb drive clenched in my sweaty palm. Every part of me screamed to get back in and drive away. To vanish again, like I'd practiced so well. But something pulled me forward. Not closure. Not revenge. Something else. Guilt. Maybe. Curiosity. Or the hope, tiny and pitiful, that maybe my son didn't hate me after all. I knocked. Once. Then again. The door creaked open. Slowly. No footsteps. No voice. Just a single word, written on a post-it stuck to the wall inside. Basement. God. I almost ran. That part of the house, the basement. It was where I used to work on repairs. Where I cried the night I found out about the first affair. The place she never stepped foot in unless she needed something. I hadn't been down there since the night I left. I walked through the house like it was a museum of someone else's life. The kitchen smelled different. The walls were a new color. The living room furniture was gone. But there was still a faint, lingering trace of the past, an echo in the walls. I reached the basement door. Took a breath. Opened it. What I saw wasn't what I expected. There was no person. No confrontation. Just a table. A laptop. And beside it, a printed folder with my name on it. My real name. In bold. I sat down. Opened the folder. Inside were documents. Dozens. Some medical. Some legal. Some personal. And at the very top was a note written in my son's handwriting, messier than I remembered, but unmistakable. Dad, I know what she did. All of it. And it's so much worse than you ever knew. That was the moment my stomach turned inside out. Because I thought I had seen the worst already. I thought I had lived through the full weight of betrayal. But what Gideon was about to show me would change everything I believed about my wife, my past, and even myself. And there was no going back. The air in that basement was still and cold, like it had been holding its breath since the night I left. Dust clung to the corners of the walls, and the bulb overhead flickered slightly, casting a weak orange glow over the table where my entire past was now laid bare. I didn't want to touch anything. Every page in that folder felt radioactive, like peeling it open would release something I could never unsee. But I had already come this far. The first document on top wasn't what I expected. It was a letter, a real one, handwritten. And it wasn't from Gideon. It was from someone named Everett Grant. That name meant nothing to me. But as I read, my fingers trembled. Clancy, if you're reading this, it means Gideon has chosen to tell you what I couldn't. I owed you more than silence, but back then, I was too afraid to get involved. Too afraid of what she'd do. I was your neighbor. I knew things. I saw things. I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to lose what I had. I regret that now. What in the world did that mean? I dug further. Next were photocopies, emails between my ex-wife Darcy and someone listed only as R. The tone was flirtatious, manipulative. But what chilled me most was the timeline. These messages weren't from the year before our divorce. They were from before Gideon was even born. I read one message twice, trying to make sure I understood it right. You think he suspects anything? Huh. He's too busy trying to be dad of the year to question where that baby really came from. That sentence hit me like a brick to the face. My heart raced. I stared at those words, unsure if I had slipped into some surreal nightmare. I felt the blood drain from my arms. My lips moved, but I couldn't form a single word. Was this a joke? A cruel fake? I pulled up the laptop. It had already been turned on. A folder sat on the desktop labeled Truth. Inside it were videos, pictures, text messages, and scans of medical files. Some of them had dates that went back farther than our wedding. One file, marked confidential, contained the result of a paternity test. I hesitated. I hovered over the file for almost a full minute. My reflection in the screen stared back at me, older, grayer, broken. When I finally opened it, the file said everything in 3 blunt lines. Child, Gideon Rowell. Alleged father, Clancy Rowell. Probability of paternity, 0%. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just blinked. The room tilted slightly. The walls stretched outward like I was in a tunnel. I stood up, backed away from the screen, and sat down again hard. My knees couldn't hold me. She had told me I was his father. For years, I built my world around that belief. Every birthday party, every bedtime story, every time I called him buddy, it was all real to me. And now I was being told it was all fake. That I had spent years raising a child that wasn't even mine. But even as my heart cracked open and poured out onto that dusty basement floor, there was a louder voice screaming underneath the pain. Why is Gideon the one showing me this? If I wasn't his real father, why had he sought me out? Why had he called me dad in the note? Why now, after all this time? I flipped back to the handwritten page from him. My eyes skimmed it like they were starving. I found out everything when I turned 16. I confronted her. She told me lies at first, but eventually she admitted it. I hated her for what she did, but I hated you too for leaving. I didn't know why. I thought you abandoned me. She told everyone you were a drunk, that you cheated, that you wanted nothing to do with me. And I believed her. Until I found the videos. The videos? I scrolled through the folder again. There was one labeled security_feed_archive. I opened it. My hands were practically vibrating from tension. There were multiple clips. One showed me, on a loop, sitting alone in the garage, holding my head in my hands. Another showed Darcy letting a man into our house while I was at work, leading him up the stairs. Yet another, darker one, showed her talking about me on a call, laughing. He doesn't even know I switched the samples. The idiot thinks that baby is his. That's the real comedy. My legs gave out beneath me. I fell to the floor and stayed there, eyes on the ceiling. My stomach felt like a sinkhole, and every breath I took tasted like metal. I had been lied to, used, manipulated. I thought I had escaped the worst when I left. But I hadn't escaped anything. I'd only delayed it. I thought I was weak for walking away. But the truth was, I never had a chance. She never gave me one. I sat there in the dark for what must have been over an hour, staring at the flickering light above, until I finally said it aloud, my first words in that house in 18 years. She never loved me. And suddenly, a voice behind me replied. But I did. I spun around. And standing at the top of the basement stairs was Gideon. Not a child. Not a boy. A man. My son. Or at least, the boy I had once believed was mine. He stood there in the doorway like a memory given flesh, like some unfinished part of my soul had finally found its way back into the room. Gideon. Taller than I remembered. Broader in the shoulders. His hair darker, face sharper, voice deeper. But those eyes, they hadn't changed. They were the same eyes I used to see peeking over a blanket, waiting for bedtime stories about volcanoes and moon men. I couldn't speak at first. My throat was too tight, the air too thick. I wanted to ask 100 questions at once. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to run. My body didn't know what to do, so I just sat there on the basement floor, broken, stunned, staring up at the man he'd become. He stepped down the stairs slowly, like he wasn't sure if I'd lash out or collapse. Probably both were on the table. I know it's a lot, he said quietly. I didn't want to hit you with everything all at once. I laughed, or tried to. It came out cracked and uneven. So you thought I'd take it better if I found out my whole life was a lie through a folder on a dusty laptop? He looked down. You're right. I didn't know how to do this. I've been carrying this around since I was a kid. And I guess part of me thought maybe if I just dropped the truth in front of you, you'd pick it up, and we could finally talk like we should have a long time ago. There was silence again. Long uncomfortable. Finally, I asked, why now? Why, after all this time? He sighed and sat on the edge of the old workbench, the same one I used to fix broken toys on when he was little. Because she's dying. My heart stopped. Darcy, I said, barely above a whisper. He nodded. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. Doctor says months, maybe less. I didn't know how to react. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel relief. I felt nothing. Like someone had thrown a bucket of static into my chest. All those years of pain. And now the woman who destroyed me was fading into dust, and I had no idea what that meant for me. She told me everything last year, Gideon continued. Not just about the affair. Not just about the paternity. Everything. How she manipulated people. The lies she spread. The way she turned everyone against you after you left. She kept feeding us these stories about how you were unstable, dangerous, that you'd taken off with another woman. Everyone believed her. I believed her. He looked up, eyes glassy. And for a long time, I hated you. I blamed you for everything. For leaving. For never coming back. For never trying. I did try, I said, my voice cracking. You think I didn't want to call? That I didn't want to fight for you? Every day I looked at my phone and told myself, just one call. One message. But then I'd remember what she was capable of. The way she made me doubt myself. I thought if I came back, she'd twist you against me worse. Or worse, use you to break me even more. He nodded slowly. She would have. She almost did. Another silence passed. Then he reached into his coat pocket and handed me something. It was a small box. Inside was a USB drive. This one isn't just surveillance footage, he said. It's conversations. Hidden audio. Phone backups. I collected them over the last 5 years. Ever since I figured out what she was doing. 5 years. I asked. You've known for 5 years and said nothing? I needed proof, he said firmly. Not just for me, but for you. I needed to show you I wasn't her, that I didn't inherit her deceit. I needed you to hear it, not from her lips, but from hers when she thought no one was listening. I took the drive, hand shaking slightly. What's on here? Recordings, he said, voice cold now. Of her talking to people about what she did. About how she ruined you. About how she convinced your boss to let you go. About how she messed with your taxes so the IRS would come after you after the divorce. She didn't just betray you, Dad. She erased you, piece by piece. My head spun. She got me fired? She made sure you couldn't afford a lawyer. She even forged your signature on custody withdrawal papers, one she never submitted but waved around to family so they'd think you gave up on me willingly. She wanted to be the victim. She needed to be. It felt like someone had dropped me from a tall building and I was still falling. All this time, I thought I was weak for walking away. But she had been tearing me down long before I even left. She said you were a ghost, Gideon muttered, looking away. But now I see, she was the one who turned you into one. I didn't know what to say. My brain couldn't keep up with the avalanche of truth. Every file in the folder, every word Gideon spoke, it all painted a picture I hadn't dared imagine, because it meant accepting that my whole life had been stolen. Not just my wife, not just my son, my identity, my name, my sanity. And yet, here he was, Gideon. He had found the pieces I'd left behind and put them together without even knowing if I'd want them. I need something from you, he said suddenly. Not money, not help, just something. I braced myself. What is it? I want you to meet someone. There's one more person who deserves to know the truth. Someone else she lied to. Someone whose life got twisted in all this too. I narrowed my eyes. Who? He looked up. My half-sister. At first, I thought I'd misheard him. I just blinked at him from across the basement like the words hadn't landed properly in my brain. You're, what? I asked, my voice thin. Gideon looked down at his hands, then back up at me, jaw tight, like he was measuring how much truth I could take before I shattered again. My half-sister, he said. I found out about her by accident. Mom never told anyone, not even the man she claimed was my real father. She gave the baby up. Quietly. Covered her tracks. Changed names on forms. It was like she wanted to erase it. I stood up too fast and had to catch myself against the wall. My legs were trembling, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer weight of that revelation. A child. A whole human being I'd never known about. A sister my son never met until recently. And Darcy, she just got rid of her? Like a spare? When? I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. She was born a year before me, he said. That's why she hid it so well. No one was really paying attention. It was before she met you. She was 19. And the guy? Just a fling. I only pieced it together because I found adoption papers in a box in the attic after her diagnosis. I thought it was a mistake. Until I found her. I had to sit back down. You found her? I asked. He nodded. Her name is Clara now. She lives 2 towns over. She never knew who her birth parents were. Her adoptive family passed away a few years ago. She's been searching on and off, trying to piece together anything she could. So when I reached out and gave her what I found, it nearly broke her. I tried to process it. Darcy hadn't just been unfaithful. She hadn't just lied about my son, faked legal documents, manipulated everyone around us, and made me vanish into the shadows of my own life. No, she had also abandoned a child. Hid her. Buried her in silence. And Gideon, somehow, had dug her back out. I leaned forward, rubbing my hands over my face. Why? Why do you want me to meet her? Because you're the only person who knows what it feels like, he said. To be lied to. To be erased. Clara deserves to look someone in the eye who understands what she went through. And because she's the only family I have who didn't come from a lie. The words gutted me. And the worst part? He was right. I spent the rest of that day in a fog. Gideon stayed with me in the house for a few hours. We didn't talk much after that conversation. He let me wander from room to room like a ghost in a museum, staring at old photos, furniture I didn't recognize, decorations that didn't belong to the life I left behind. It wasn't my home anymore. It was a shell that wore my past like a costume. Eventually, I left and drove back to my small, quiet apartment above the corner laundromat. The hum of the dryers in the walls was the only thing grounding me in reality. That night, I didn't sleep again. I played one of the audio files from the second USB drive. It was a phone call Darcy had made to someone, maybe a friend, maybe a therapist, her voice muffled but distinct. I never loved him. He was just easy. Clancy made me feel safe, and safety is boring. I needed more. I always did. And if that makes me a monster, then so be it. It wasn't anger that filled me when I heard those words. It was grief. Not for her. Not anymore. But for who I used to be, the man who thought love meant devotion, who thought he built something that could outlast temptation, who thought he mattered to someone that never saw him at all. The next day, Gideon picked me up. He drove us to a modest house on the edge of a wooded neighborhood, nothing fancy, nothing suburban, just quiet and tucked away. Clara opened the door before we even knocked. She looked nothing like Darcy. Her eyes were softer, her stance defensive, like a woman who'd spent her life preparing for disappointment. When she saw me, her face froze. She started, then trailed off. I'm not your father, I said, unsure why I felt the need to clarify that. I know, she replied, but you're the only one who didn't leave on purpose. I didn't know what to say to that. We sat at her kitchen table. I noticed she only had 3 chairs. That simple detail crushed me more than any document, any recording, any admission. She had never expected to meet family again. We didn't dive into the past right away. Clara talked about her life, small things. Her love for old movies. Her job at a bookstore. Her fear of dogs. The way she compulsively arranged her pantry alphabetically. I told her about the years I spent disappearing, cleaning buildings at night, eating in diners, watching the same news anchor every morning like she was the only person who knew I was alive. Somewhere in that quiet, something strange happened. I felt okay. Not healed. Not whole. But less invisible. That evening, just as we were leaving, Clara stopped me at the door. She told me once, my adoptive mom, that sometimes people don't need closure. They need someone to witness their pain so they know it was real. I nodded, unsure how to respond. Then she said, if I write her a letter, would you deliver it? To the hospital? The idea of seeing Darcy again frail, dying, after all she'd done, made my stomach churn. But for Clara, who never even got a first word, let alone a goodbye. Yes, I whispered. I'll deliver it. Even if it killed me. I didn't drive straight to the hospital that night. I couldn't. Instead, I parked 3 blocks away and sat in the car with the engine off, watching the rain beat up on the windshield like it was trying to hide me. The letter from Clara was folded perfectly in the glove compartment, still sealed with a little piece of floral washi tape. She had handed it to me with both palms, like it weighed more than her past. And maybe it did. It wasn't the idea of seeing Darcy again that had me paralyzed. It was the possibility of what I might feel, or worse, what I wouldn't. Part of me expected rage, or triumph, or even some dramatic confrontation that would tie everything up neatly. But what I really feared was standing there in front of her and feeling nothing at all. What if she wasn't a monster in that hospital bed? What if she was just an old, dying woman who didn't even remember my name? When I finally walked into the building, the smell of antiseptic hit me hard. A strange kind of grief bloomed in my chest, the grief of returning to a place where you don't belong, yet somehow never stopped haunting. I signed in as a visitor, using my real name for the first time in years. The nurse at the front desk didn't blink. The world hadn't kept track of me, after all. I was still invisible. They told me she was in room 614, palliative care wing. I passed rows of closed doors and quiet televisions flickering against sterile walls. Somewhere down the hall, someone was crying softly. A nurse wheeled a man with bandaged legs into an elevator. I felt like I was walking deeper into a grave I'd already been buried in once. When I reached the room, the door was open, and there she was. Darcy. She looked smaller. Her hair was thinner, pulled back into a weak ponytail. Her skin was pale, her eyes sunken. There were tubes, monitors, a soft oxygen hum, but none of it could hide who she was. Even now, even like this, she still held herself with a quiet sort of defiance, as if death was just another man she planned to outsmart. I stood in the doorway for a long time before she noticed me. When she finally turned her head, our eyes met, and she didn't flinch. You came, she said. Her voice was paper thin, but not surprised. I stepped inside, slowly. Did you know I would? She gave the faintest shrug. Gideon has your stubbornness. I figured he'd find you eventually. I didn't sit. I didn't speak. I just stood there, the letter in my coat pocket like a weight pressing into my side. She looked toward the window. So, how long are you planning to stand there like a priest at a confession booth? I took a step forward. You're dying. You could try apologizing. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. And you could have tried staying. My blood chilled. You destroyed me, I said, my voice trembling. You lied about Gideon. You faked papers. You erased me. You told people I was dangerous, that I abandoned our son. You ruined my name. You. I protected what was mine, she said, cutting me off. Those words stunned me. She said them so calmly, so matter-of-factly, like she was justifying a parking ticket, not 2 decades of emotional wreckage. You didn't protect anything, I snapped. You left Gideon confused. You left Clara abandoned. You left me with nothing. And you got away with it. For years. Did I? She said, coughing weakly. Look around, Clancy. Does this look like getting away with anything? I almost laughed. So this is your punishment? A hospital bed and a morphine drip? That's what you think balances the scale. She coughed again, harder this time. A nurse peeked in briefly, then retreated without a word. Darcy wiped her mouth and looked at me again, this time softer. I never expected to die loved, she whispered. But I didn't think I'd die known, either. Gideon. He knows too much. I pulled the letter from my coat and set it on her bedside table without a word. She eyed it warily. Is that from her? Yes, I said. Clara. She didn't touch it. Didn't even look at it. She doesn't need to forgive me, she murmured. I didn't ask for that. You didn't ask for anything, I said. You just took. You took my son. My name. My life. She leaned back and stared at the ceiling. You weren't hard to take from. That was it. That was the sentence that ripped through me like nothing else. Not the affairs. Not the lies. That. She had known exactly who I was, soft-spoken, loyal, desperate to be loved, and she used it as a tool. I wasn't just collateral. I was a target. I hope that letter breaks you, I said quietly. She didn't respond. I turned to leave. But just as I reached the door, she said something that made me freeze in place. You should ask Gideon who really sent that email. I looked over my shoulder. What are you talking about? She smiled faintly. He didn't find you by accident. He wasn't working alone. And with that, she closed her eyes. I left the hospital with more questions than I'd walked in with. Who else was involved? Why had Gideon waited so long? And what kind of truth was still buried, waiting to shatter what little I had left? The moment I stepped out of the hospital into the cool night air, it hit me, not just the heaviness of what Darcy had said, but the horrifying realization that I still didn't know everything. After everything she'd already confessed to through recordings, footage, and silence, she had somehow managed to dangle one final thread before the curtain closed. You should ask Gideon who really sent that email. It was a riddle I couldn't shake. That email, those 2 words, it's time, was the spark that pulled me back into this world. The thing that forced me to face the wreckage of a life I thought I'd buried. I had believed it came from my son. I wanted to believe that. But now, the entire foundation of that belief was cracked. And when you've already watched your life fall apart once, every small fracture feels like the start of another collapse. I didn't call Gideon right away. I drove, aimlessly, through neighborhoods that used to feel like home. Past gas stations where I'd once bought coffee before long shifts. Past the park where I used to push him on the swings. Every memory that had been buried for 18 years was suddenly radioactive again, glowing, humming, burning under the surface. At 2 a.m., I parked outside the apartment Gideon shared with a couple of roommates. I didn't even text. I just stood outside the building until the porch light flipped on and the door creaked open. He appeared in the doorway in sweatpants, shirtless, barefoot, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. You okay? He asked, stepping outside. Who sent the email? I asked. The words were sharp. I didn't ease into it. I couldn't. He blinked at me like I'd slapped him awake. What? I stepped closer. Don't lie. She said you didn't send it. That someone else contacted me. So tell me, Gideon, who knew where I was? Who pulled the string? He looked away, down at the ground. Silent. My voice cracked. Don't make me ask again. He took a deep breath, and then said something I wasn't prepared for. Clara. I felt like the air had been punched out of me. What? He nodded slowly. She found you before I did. She's been searching for years, longer than me. After her adoptive parents died, she started digging into records, DNA sites, public databases. She found your name in one of Mom's sealed documents. I only found out because she reached out to me first, hoping I could confirm that she was who she suspected she was. I staggered back a step. She didn't tell me at first, he added quickly. She was trying to protect you. Said she didn't want to rip open wounds unless she was sure. But when Mom got sick, Clara made the decision. She sent the email. I was stunned, not because of the betrayal, but because of what it meant. The person I had only just met, the woman whose letter I delivered like a final kindness, had been the one to rip open the door to everything I tried to escape. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. Because I didn't want you to shut down, he said. You trusted me. Barely. I figured if you knew a stranger was the one who tracked you down, you'd disappear again. And I couldn't let that happen. I sat down on the porch steps, my head spinning. She manipulated me. Just like Darcy did. She's not like Mom, Gideon said firmly. I didn't respond. The next morning, Clara called me. She didn't apologize, not exactly, but her voice was gentle, careful. I thought you deserved the truth, she said. Even if I had to deliver it the wrong way. I didn't know how to respond, so I said nothing. She continued. I found something else. Something I didn't show you yet. I wasn't sure how to say it, but I think you need to see it before she dies. Darcy? I asked. She hesitated. No. Someone else. An hour later, Clara handed me a folder. Thin. Only a few pages. But what was inside cracked something open I didn't know was still locked inside me. It was a transcript of a legal deposition, sealed and hidden, but recovered through a private investigator Clara had hired years ago. The deposition belonged to a man named Victor Lane. My brother. I hadn't spoken to Victor since long before the divorce. We weren't close. He was wild, impulsive, always chasing money and women. I never trusted him. But apparently, Darcy had. In the deposition, Victor confessed to helping Darcy forge legal documents, custody papers, financial documents, and he did it for a price. She had paid my brother to destroy me. I couldn't breathe. I had lost my wife, my son, my dignity, not just because of her, but because someone I shared blood with had sold me out for a check. That night, I found Victor. He lived 2 counties away, ran a small used car lot, still dressed like a man 20 years younger, still smiled with teeth too white to be real. He recognized me instantly. You're supposed to be dead, he said casually, lighting a cigarette. I was, I replied. We didn't fight. We didn't yell. I just stood there and let him explain himself. He admitted to it all, with a shrug. She said you were already halfway gone. Just needed a little push. I figured if I didn't take the money, someone else would. She had dirt on a dozen people. I just happened to be the one who answered the phone. That was the moment I realized how deep the hole really went. It wasn't just Darcy. She was the match. But others had built the fire. I didn't tell anyone I was going back to the hospital. No calls. No texts. Not even a knock at Clara's door. After confronting my brother, after hearing the full extent of his betrayal, after standing there listening to him rationalize why selling out your own flesh and blood was just business, I knew I needed to see Darcy one last time. Not for her. Not even for Gideon or Clara. For me. The ride was quiet. No music. Just the hum of the tires on wet pavement and the weight of everything I'd carried for nearly 2 decades, finally rising to the surface like a body you thought had sunk too deep to ever float again. This time, when I stepped through the hospital doors, I felt different. Not stronger. Not healed. But real. Present. Like a man who no longer had to hide from his own shadow. She was asleep when I walked in. Her body was frail, sunken cheeks, thin wrists, a small bruise on her arm from where a nurse had missed the vein. Machines beeped gently, steady, but fading. I pulled a chair up to the side of her bed and sat quietly, unsure what I wanted to say, or if I even needed to say anything at all. Then, without warning, her eyes opened. She didn't flinch when she saw me. Didn't ask why I'd come. She just looked, tired. Maybe even grateful. You came back, she rasped. I nodded. For a moment, we sat in silence. Then she spoke, softer than I'd ever heard her. You were always the one I underestimated. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to fight about. Nothing left to accuse. She continued, barely above a whisper. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know, I never hated you. I know, I said. That was the problem. She smiled faintly. Still dramatic. I let out a weak laugh. Still toxic. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then, with a deep breath, she reached slowly under the pillow and pulled out a small, folded envelope. I asked the nurse to give this to you if you didn't come. But I'm glad you did. I took the envelope in my hands. It was addressed to me, in her handwriting shaky, but unmistakable. She didn't ask me to open it in front of her. She just exhaled and turned her head toward the window. That was the last time I saw her awake. She passed in her sleep a few hours later. When I got home that night, I sat at my table with the letter unopened in front of me. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to burn it, to throw it out with the rest of the past. But eventually, I broke the seal. The letter was short. Clancy. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Good. That means you survived me. You always should have. I broke more than just your heart. I broke the truth. I don't deserve to be remembered, but you deserve to be seen. Gideon loves you, even when he didn't know how to say it. Clara is stronger because you listened. And you're still whole, even after everything. Don't vanish again. Be the man you were always meant to be. Darcy. I cried. Not for her, but for the piece of myself I'd buried with her years ago, and that I was finally willing to pull back out. The weeks that followed were quiet but healing. Gideon and I started spending real time together. No big reunions. No forced bonding. Just small things, watching old movies, arguing over pizza toppings, showing him how to check the oil in his car. The kind of things I used to dream about from a distance. Clara visited often. We'd sit on the porch and read in silence, or just talk about absolutely nothing. She even gave me a job at her bookstore, nothing fancy, just organizing shelves and helping with customers. But for the first time in years, I felt useful. I felt human. On the one-year anniversary of Darcy's passing, we didn't hold a memorial. We didn't speak her name. Instead, we planted a tree in Clara's backyard. A small cherry blossom tree. Gideon thought it was a strange choice. She hated pink, he said. That's exactly why I picked it, I replied. We laughed. And for the first time in 2 decades, the sound didn't feel borrowed. I'm not writing this for pity. I'm writing it because if someone out there feels invisible, like they've been erased, replaced, forgotten, I want you to know, you're not gone. You're just waiting to be found again. Sometimes, the worst betrayals lead us back to the parts of ourselves we didn't know were still alive. And sometimes, even ghosts find their way home.